Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Today we have a very special episode of F That because I'm wearing costume and uh, and because I can and because these days wearing costume, showing the world you're a geek, playing Dungeons and Dragons, liking Marvel superheroes is considered cool. It used to be not that way, and that's mainly the reason why I decided to make a video about my experience growing up in the 80s and being a Dungeons and Dragons player. Just recently, you know, uh, Dungeons and Dragons Honor Among Thieves opened in cinemas, and if you're a geek or a nerd worth your cred, then you've probably seen it by now. And I was fortunate enough to be at an event promoting the movie, and during that event, we were, teaching people how to paint miniatures, Dungeons and Dragons miniatures. And at one point, while we were demoing, uh, I was asked by someone. Uh, she asked me if what she saw on Stranger Things, where the Dungeons and Dragons players, which were the main characters in that TV series, were being persecuted and bullied in school, and that they were being blamed as Satan worshippers. And basically, you know, uh, she's currently still studying in university, and to her, something like that was like way out of her experience when it comes to this hobby. And I had to tell her that during the 80s, when I was growing up, which was also when Stranger Things was supposed to be happening, there really was this thing called the Satanic Panic, and people were really scared, and peop- a lot of people believed that Dungeons and Dragons led to Satan worship, and it was a very real thing. And it was on TV, it was on media. There were even movies about it, starring Tom Hanks, where they didn't call it Dungeons and Dragons. I think it was called Mazes and Monsters, where Tom Hanks got possessed because he was playing this game called Mazes and Monsters, or something like that. I remember watching that movie as well, and reminiscing those things makes me realize how far we've gone in this hobby or in this fandom, and it makes me appreciate how accepted this type of hobby, this geekiness is now. In fact, while we were discussing, uh, she actually told me that these days, some people actually consider it cool for you to be playing Dungeons and Dragons. Like, people will actually ask you if you play Dungeons and Dragons and ask you to teach them, or they would ask you to play with them. And this is definitely a very, very different experience from what I had when I was growing up in the 80s, especially in the Philippines, where uh, we're a predominantly Catholic and conservative society. Uh, so I was actually fortunate enough to have very understanding parents who believed me when I told them that playing Dungeons and Dragons isn't really about worshiping demons and stuff. And they see me playing it, and they don't see any behavioral changes as far as their geeky son is concerned. So I was still the well-behaved boy that they're kind of used to. So They just let me be, enjoy the things I enjoyed. So I was very fortunate with that. Unfortunately, some of my friends weren't as fortunate, and they had really had to hide uh, playing Dungeons and Dragons, and I guess even to some extent I also did. It's not something that I advertised in school, like, "Hey, you want to play Dungeons and Dragons with me?" Hey, no, no, we can't even play it in school. Uh, if anybody sees the words dungeons at that time, if anybody saw us bring the book around, or and openly play in school, I'd probably get expelled. uh, so things have changed drastically, and this change didn't happen overnight. uh, on on the same table where I was being asked if the Stranger Things scenario was real, uh, we also had someone who grew up in the 90s and someone who grew up in the early 2000s with us on the table. And it was very apparent from our discussion, like when I started talking back in my day, it was very apparent in our discussion that views have changed gradually over time, and people became more accepting, and up to the point where it is today, where it might even be considered cool for someone to be playing Dungeons and Dragons. Like back in the day, we wouldn't be caught dead uh, playing in public. So Dungeons and Dragons, people were playing in basements and hiding, mainly because there was such a big stigma back then. But nowadays, you would see people playing in like the main atrium of a mall in a big event, 50 plus people playing Dungeons and Dragons, with promoting a movie with A-list actors, and with a big Hollywood budget. Things have certainly changed, and these are changes for the better. And during that conversation, there was also this discussion about how some gamers or fans from my generation were trying to gatekeep the hobby, probably because they felt that back in the day we had a hard time. Therefore, the new generation also has to have a hard time to appreciate the hobby. I don't agree with that philosophy. Like, what do they want to do? They want to haze the new gamers, the new fans. I don't even believe in hazing. Hazing is a stupid practice. Like, frats might not agree with me, but I think hazing, or hurting your brother physically, and stupid stuff like that, is not the proper way to build brotherhood. Brotherhood is built by shared experiences. The strongest brotherhoods are built on shared trauma, like people who've gone to war together. But it's not built on one brother or one sister hurting the other. That's not how you build brotherhood or camaraderie. And I don't think, and I believe it the same thing should be in this hobby, and we should just make it as welcoming as possible to people who want to experience the same things that we enjoy. So that's pretty much it. It's just me reminiscing how hard it was back in the day to play and even source stuff for Dungeons and Dragons. Now, like Dungeons and Dragons can be found in bookstores, stores in the malls, and it's so easy to get into the hobby, and you would even be considered cool. So, I think that's just a very happy thing, and I'm really happy that that's the case. And I hope we grow our numbers. Until next time, once again, here I am, Freddy Tan. Goodbye.